All right. I am going to do what might be the dumbest thing I could possibly do. And that's make a second video about deck rails. So I made a video about a week ago about deck rails, and I was testing out these pig deck rails right here on this Heroin twin nose setup. It's actually basically the same board that I have right here. And I was testing out whether I like deck rails, whether I don't like deck rails. I had never tried them before. And I knew when I made that video that that video was going to be the video that received the largest amount of dislikes of any video I've made on this channel. I just had so many responses that made me think, you know what? Maybe it's worth giving this deck rails thing a second try. That's what we're going to do today. Now, the reason I say it's the dumbest thing I could possibly do is if I made one video that got the most dislikes of any video that I've made, it seems like not the smartest decision to then kind of double down and make a second version of that video. But that's what I'm going to give a try. That's what I'm going to do today. So the comments that I got the most frequently about deck rails were first people saying that deck rails are mostly for curb skating, and I was trying them on an elevated curb. It was a curb I was trying it on, but an elevated curb. And I was also trying out the deck rails on kind of a rail. Now, this is what I'd say is I chose those obstacles pretty intentionally because they were both chunky concrete and they were both not super waxed. And that's what people always told me they skated deck rails for. So most of the comments I got were saying I should have been trying them on curbs. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to try it out on a curb. I think this curb actually is going to be pretty good. Yesterday, or not yesterday, but 2 days ago, I was skating here and my board actually was sticking a little bit on that curb. So it's not very waxed. It's a painted curb. It does have some wax on it, but not a lot of wax. The other comment I got really frequently on that last video was people saying that they skate deck rails because it allows them to do board slides on unwaxed concrete, which seems a little surprising to me. Like, I don't know, I'll try to find some spots that we can test that on. I can't picture deck rails actually sliding on rough concrete that doesn't have any wax on it or any paint on it. That seems a little bit surprising to me, but you know, we'll give it our best try, and we'll see what we can test out. I do think a concrete ledge like this is kind of what people are talking about a little bit with the deck rails. This is painted concrete. If I take my non-deck rails board over this painted concrete, it does go somewhat decent. Because it's got a larger surface, it kind of goes over the roughness. And then I take the board with deck rails, I put the same pressure on it, and I push, and it actually like immediately gets stuck on every little, not little, these are actually kind of big. It does get stuck a lot there. Well, maybe not that spot, like that's crazy rough, but I do think this is the type of stuff people are kind of talking about when they talk about deck rails. But it does smooth out up here. This is like 5 feet in the air, so I'm definitely not ollieing up and board sliding this. But with deck rails, it just gets stuck even on the smallest stuff. And maybe it wouldn't if I was board sliding, but just with hand pressure, the wood seems significantly smoother. Me just pressing down with my hands is not a very scientific test, but it almost won't go at all with the deck rails. Take that with a grain of salt because that was the most unscientific thing ever. I was not standing on the board, I was just pressing down with my hands. But what we should be testing is this bad boy right here. Obviously it's painted and it's got just the thinnest layer of wax. Since the board already has no deck rails on it, that's what we'll start off with. This is the same exact deck, and then I'm just going to be switching trucks and wheels over. So there will be nothing different in either of these setups. Just one will have deck rails and one will not. Board slide. This is my first board slide of the day. No wax on the curb. The other day I did this and I did feel a little bit sticky, to be completely honest and transparent. Not trying to be too biased, but I am going to skate with a little more speed than I was the other day. What was that, the third attempt maybe? And I wasn't even going that fast, to be honest. Here's a little bit faster. Okay. You saw we did get slowed down. When I bend my knees and I feel like I have a good rhythm, it doesn't feel like there's any issue at all. And I can feel and hear that this is not a buttery, smooth curb. Yeah, I feel like we can do the whole curb, no issue whatsoever, as long as I have the right amount of speed. Oh, okay. Why do we call that coming out fakie and not coming out switch? Yeah, I just don't feel, again, this is like, I can't even feel the wax on here, to be honest, if I rub with my fingernail. And there's a lot of this that is literally just bare concrete. So this is not like a incredibly waxed surface. It is waxed, like I think I'm one of the only people who skates this curb. And about a week and a half ago I came here and there was no wax on it whatsoever. And I just put a little bit of wax on it. Board slide to fakie. Oh my gosh. I was leaning back a little bit there. Kickflip. First try. Oh. I'm not great at coming out fakie. I don't think this currently is having to do with the limitation of the deck rails, but deck rails will be lifting me about half an inch higher, and maybe just that little distance will help me when pivoting out, having a little more time to pivot out. I mean, even there I wasn't skating fast and it slid plenty smooth. To mention, as I landed that one, so that was nice. Honestly, this is the obstacle right here. If I don't see a benefit on a curb for deck rails, then I don't really see a purpose for me putting deck rails on my skateboard, just because of the obstacles that I skate. Because I didn't see any benefit when I skated a rail. So if I don't see a benefit on a curb or an unwaxed curb or anything like that, then I don't really see a place for deck rails in my personal skating. So I'm going to do one more board slide where I'm going to try to get the entire curb, and I'm actually going to intentionally not skate that fast this time, just to see what that's like with no deck rails at kind of a medium speed. Actually, this feels really slow. This is too slow. You know what? That might help testing though, because I just skated really, really slow. I wish I had like a mile per hour counter and I could like get the perfect amount of speed, deck rails and not deck rails. I'm going to try my best to skate at the same speed with deck rails and without deck rails. One push, okay, right there. Okay, my wheels hit the ground. All right. This is what I see a lot of people doing with deck rails, actually, is doing really, really slow board slides like this where they're just coasting. Gonna try to balance a little better this time. Okay, you see right there about at the end, it started sticking and I didn't make it through. I'm gonna do one more fast board slide, and then I'm gonna switch the deck over. Easy. Easy peasy. Lemon squeezy. Heel flip. Ah, dang it. Switched out my trucks. All right, let's try board slide, normal board slide. Notice any differences right off the bat? Okay. Whoa. The deck rail lovers are going to be laughing at me. Maybe there was something about those specific curbs that I skated last time that I didn't notice too much of a difference. But that was like ice. Oh, that's actually a little bit scary. That is an extreme difference. My first video where I tested deck rails, I really truthfully did not notice much of a difference outside of sound. And those two slides right then just felt mega different. Okay, that's okay. Dang it. I'm saying dang it because this is not what I felt last time when I tested them. I also tested them twice. I do want to be clear about that. I did not rush that video and put it out after one session. I did test them twice, and I tested deck rails on a metal rail. I really didn't notice any difference on a metal rail. And then another ledge, which I didn't notice a huge difference on. But this right here, that's a ridiculous difference. I really don't need much speed to do that trick. I mean, that is really fast. Yeah, that's very smooth and consistent. The sound is really, really different. Second try coming out to fakie. I don't know if that is simply because I've warmed up a little bit. I also hear them rattling a little bit on my deck while I'm rolling around. Kind of bothers me a little bit. And they feel super tight. So I know some people put a double-sided adhesive underneath, I believe, to prevent that rattling. This is a super consistent slide. That's making this not very waxed curb feel pretty waxed. It's interesting why I didn't feel such a difference at the spot in my last video. If you have any thoughts or insights, let me know. Why didn't I feel such a difference on those obstacles from video 1? Even though they were both concrete and even though they were both not super waxed. All right, let's try the slow one. I think this is where it's going to be fascinating. Yeah, I don't know if you saw that. I was going a little bit faster than earlier because I did 2 pushes, but that was really slow, and I didn't slow down at all at any point on the curb. This is the slowest I've gone yet. I was basically crawling inch by inch, and I still slid. This is the same speed as earlier. And last time I could not get to the end. This time I did get to the end. Okay, that's pretty clear, right? Like I am a deck rails hater, but that is pretty clear and obvious evidence of a place where deck rails help. And I think it helped in 2 ways. One, I do think being a little bit higher off the ground gives me a little more clearance from my wheels touching side to side. I think it's easier to balance front and back with these deck rails. And then last but not least, it stayed mega consistent all the way to the end on its speed. What if I'm skating and I'm really comfortable with my board slides like that? Then I try to do a nose slide at like the same kind of medium speed. And now I'm just sticking, right? So for me, it feels a little bit weird in my brain that a board slide is going to feel like ice, and I have to be ready for it to be super, super slick. And then a nose slide, oh, or a nose slide is not gonna go at the same speed. So let's go kind of medium-ish speed with the nose slide. This would be super slick, and it just stops. One thing that's a little bit weird for me is that inconsistency between board slides and node slides. Let me know in the comments, does that bother you if you're skating deck rails and you have to go super fast for a nose slide and then you have to go super slow for a board slide? Is that something you care about? So this is probably the least practical test, the least practical application of these deck rails, because what skate park, what street spot, what place actually has like a fully plastic obstacle like this? If you watched in one of my recent videos, I finally figured out what this is. It's a playground ramp to help make playgrounds more accessible, I guess, for like wheelchairs and things like that. I have no clue why somebody brought it out to this basketball court. Let's see how these deck rails do on this plastic ramp. Oh, that was scary. I can do this pretty well with the normal deck with no deck rails. Oh, that is scary slidey. Okay, I don't know if you saw that, but I hit it where I normally do, and it slid sideways. I don't know, that was actually kind of scary. Oh. Okay, this became infinitely scarier. This is like treacherous ice. Oh my gosh. I don't like this, but I'm gonna do it. Oh. Oh. Not loving this. I don't know if that's coming across on camera, but like, instead of just like hitting it and sliding forward, I'm hitting it and it's either sliding that way or that way. It's a little unsettling, to be fair. Oh, we landed it though. I don't think that's something I want to do regularly with deck rails. That curb has a little bit of wax, and I saw a pretty drastic difference. So I do want to just go ahead and say, like, I think there were some things in my first video that I was a little bit wrong about. That is a massive, massive difference in the board slide without deck rails and the board slide with deck rails. You especially saw it when I was skating slow, when I did the board slide at a really slow speed on each of the decks. That test right there is so obvious to me that there is an advantage to people who do want to skate deck rails. If they want to skate deck rails and there's a curb that doesn't have a lot of wax, they can do board slides. I get it. It makes sense. There are also times that I do think deck rails could hurt if a curb does have some ridges and some bumps and some things like that. The deck rails can grab on them and they could pitch you off the board. Another thing is that inconsistency between a nose slide and a board slide and how drastically different the speed needed to do each trick felt weird to me. It felt weird having a board slide that felt like ice, and then my body gets used to that. And then if I'm trying to follow that up with a nose slide, the weight balance is so different that actually could throw me off and could feel really, really bizarre. Whereas without deck rails, the difference between the board slide and the nose slide is not so significant. What if you went to your curb spot and you forgot wax? Then you're just out of luck for the session and you can't skate the curb. Well, if you forgot wax and you had these, you'd probably still be able to skate. Now, that being said, you'd only be able to do board slides. You wouldn't be able to do 50-50s. You wouldn't be able to do nose slides and things like that. But you would be able to at least do board slides. So, yeah, deck rails, I get it. Makes sense. I just don't know if personally I will keep skating them, but I get it. Every single thing that you change on your skateboard is going to have pros and cons, and everybody's going to kind of get used to a different setup. For me, I'm used to not having deck rails on, and honestly, the first couple board slides with the deck rails on kind of freaked me out a little bit. So deck rails part 2, trying out deck rails. I still have them on my board from last time I was testing them. And I did find a curb that is significantly longer than a normal curb, so I figure why not try a super long board slide on this curb without deck rails, and then with deck rails. This is with deck rails, One more. This time we have no deck rails. Okay. More speed. Okay, so it's possible. Just at the very end, here's the difference. I'm starting to kind of feel out and notice what the difference is. The initial start is a little bit faster with the deck rails, but not a ton. Then when you get to about a quarter of your speed, when you start to really slow down towards the end, that's when you don't have deck rails, you start to stick and slow down. But when you do have deck rails, you keep gliding through even when you're going slow. I'm having to actively tell myself to skate faster right now. Let me close out this video. Let me formulate my thoughts. Deck rails, no deck rails. I think deck rails make a lot of sense. I get it. Being able to, on a spot right here where there isn't much run up, but there's a super long curve that I want to board side, I can do it on deck rails with a lot less effort. Without the deck rails, right towards the end I was starting to slow down, so I had to either hit the curb later or I had to push harder, which with a short run up was almost impossible. I still, at the end of the day, like, I have wax in my bag. I wouldn't have minded putting a little wax on the end of the curve there to be able to get all the way through. I get why people skate deck rails. They make sense. I am less of a deck rails hater than I was before. I hope you forgive me for saying that I think deck rails are lame. They're not lame. They're just maybe something that I'm not going to use very often in my personal skating. I kind of like the idea of being a little more minimalist with my setup, having less things on my board. I just like the idea of that. So anyways, I don't hate you if you skate deck rails. If you do, they make a lot of sense. I was able to do board slides with very, very little speed and just kind of sit on them and just kind of coast along. And I think that's why people like them. Yeah, so thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.